Another perfect example. A Russian tank tries to cross a booby-trapped field and gets blown up. The Ukrainians send an FPV drone with a small explosive, enough to destroy the tank if it gets inside. The Ukrainian drone dives into the open hatch and explodes. We see smoke and flames. The tank is lost. If the operator manages to direct the drone into a weakly protected part of the tank, the shaped explosive can hit the tank's ammunition and cause a powerful detonation. Take a close look at this video. A Ukrainian FPV drone crashes into a Russian tank. Let's replay this video in slow motion. The drone is armed with a warhead from a handheld anti-tank grenade launcher. Now, the Ukrainian military does not need to leave their positions and hunt for Russian equipment. You can just send an FPV drone with explosives. In this video, a kamikaze drone destroys a Russian BMP that was transporting ammunition for soldiers. And this is what happens to abandoned Russian tanks in places where Ukrainians can't take them as trophies. Another Russian BMP. Apparently, the armored personnel carrier was hit by ATGMs or exploded on mines. This was the location of a Russian warehouse. Ammunition, fuel, food, and so on were stored there. Ukraine destroyed all of the Russian supplies with precise artillery fire. Those bunny boys got what they deserved. A drone crashes into the roof of a car and explodes. Do you think these Russians have gotten good? You all know this freak, don't you? Bukhanka is the pride of the Soviet automobile industry. Ukrainians continue to destroy this old Soviet junk. The Russians are trying to gain a foothold on the second line of defense. Ukrainian drone operators are kindly preventing them from doing so. Grief-stricken builders, you'd better go home while your hands and feet are still in place. The Ukrainians have discovered a Russian ammunition depot. Note that the Russians know they are being followed by a drone, but do nothing about it. It's kamikaze drone time! The operator guides it precisely into the ammunition building. High temperatures do the trick. The warehouse is destroyed. Bravo! Another warehouse. This is where the Russians store anti-tank mines. Naturally, this amount of explosives will make a powerful bada boom. Now that is where the Russians have stacked fuel, ammo, and more ammo. The drone hits the target, mission accomplished. Good job! And this is a Russian ammunition depot after an encounter with an FPV drone. It's a thing of beauty. Kakhovka Dam. The Russians put a radar system in the building. It's a special system for fighting drones. As you can see, the fight failed. Video of a real hunt for Russian reconnaissance drone operators. First, the Ukrainians discover where the Russians are stationed. Why did the Russians leave the drone on the street? A great gift to the Ukrainians. An FPV drone is many times cheaper than the target it destroyed. And here's how the Ukrainians are depriving the Russians of their vision on a certain piece of territory. This pipe has systems installed on it to monitor the surrounding territory. Or rather, were installed. It's quite exquisite work. A Russian mortar was hidden under this camouflage net. The Russians are hiding an anti-aircraft launcher. It might have worked if the Ukrainians hadn't followed them. An FPV drone destroys a Russian firing point. The Russians had set up a machine gun point in this building and were obstructing the advance. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone has remedied the situation. Now, there is one less threat in the way of Ukrainian infantrymen. And this is a small parking lot not far from the front lines. The camouflage did not help the Russians in this situation either. Friends, I show you all of these videos not to entertain you, but to show you the horror of war. Every day, hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers die in Ukraine, men and women giving their lives for the freedom and security of their country. Let us remember this. This time, the Russians decided to attack one of the Ukrainian positions with tanks. Payback was not long in coming. An FPV drone takes to the sky and chases the Russian tanks. After a moment, the drone dives and hits the exact target. And this is the Russian T-80 and its last stop in Ukraine. Beautiful burnout of the ammunition. Excellent work. Look here. 3 Russian tanks storm a village. One of them stays on the main street and starts backing up. A mine stops the movement. Precision artillery is fired at the immobilized tank. A shell explodes nearby, and shrapnel pierces the side of the tank. The shells located in the automatic loading mechanism catch fire. Another example, but using a kamikaze drone. The drone crashes into the tank, between the body and the turret. Probably an RPG-7 grenade was used as an explosive. Its armor penetration can be up to 500 millimeters, which could hit the ammunition. Immediately, the powder ignites. The shell heats up, and the tank is torn to shreds. Russians most often abandon tanks and AFVs after they are defeated. No one seeks to keep the vehicle, and this happens often in situations where it can be done successfully, without much risk. Here's an interesting fact. More than 50% of Russian tanks and AFVs were destroyed by fire. That's over 2,000 tanks and 4,000 AFVs. Pretty impressive, no? There's going to be a lot more kabooms in the next video. This video features a rare and dangerous machine. This is a Soviet engineering remote mining machine. The video shows the machine being struck by 3 FPV drones all at once. A Ukrainian drone detects the Russians in the rubble. The Russians notice it too and open fire. The coordinates of this location have already been given to Ukrainian artillery. A precise hit forces the Russians to hide in burrows. The drone returns with explosives. The operator demonstrates professionalism and delivers the explosives to the orcs with precise throws. Good job. 3 tanks are taking the military to the forest belt. The video shows Ukrainian artillery trying to prevent this. One of the shells bursts near the tank and immobilizes it. The drone returns after replacing the battery. Both tanks have already left the battlefield, leaving the hit Russian tank behind. There is a powerful explosion. The tank is torn apart. The turret is thrown into the air. Another stupid attack by the Russians. The tanks come under artillery fire. They split up. This lucky man first runs over the mines. The Ukrainian artillery strikes the immobilized tank with precision. Now, he's definitely not going anywhere. The Ukrainians fire a missile from the Stugna P missile launcher. The tank is destroyed. Another Russian engineering freak fell victim to the 72nd AFU Brigade. When the equipment was hidden in the woods, the Ukrainians launched an FPV drone. The video shows it crashing into a vehicle. Another drone is sent after it. It flies under the car and explodes. Mission accomplished. Armor turns into a mesh, shrapnel easily penetrating body armor and helmets. Usually, strike operations look like this one. The Ukrainians have detected an accumulation of soldiers and equipment in the forests of Crimea. The HIMARS pick a convenient position to hit and fire missiles. 2 tungsten-filled missiles do the job. Here we see a Russian tank that has been hit. There's no way for the Ukrainians to take it, so they use a kamikaze drone. It penetrates the armor and gets to the ammunition. Nice explosion! The crew of this tank never realized the grills will not help, but only hinder. A drone strikes a Russian T-80. The armor of the tank cannot withstand, and the grates do not save. The shells catch fire, destroying the tank. A Buck M3 SAM system, with a price tag of more than $40 million. Kaboom! Goodbye! Another unsuccessful assault by the Russians ended with this. An FPV kamikaze drone kills an abandoned armored personnel carrier. More Russian grief-stricken paratroopers. An FPV drone crashes into an armored personnel carrier. I can't show you what happened next, but believe me, the Russian soldiers got it bad. Ukrainians found 2 trucks and a warehouse of terrorists' ammunition. 2 kamikaze drones work in pairs. The first destroys the first target, followed by the second truck. The fire detonates the stacked ammunition. Nice. Another video from the category Genocide of Bucanoks in Ukraine. It burns beautifully. What about attack drones? We should not forget their contribution to the fight against Russian terrorism. A drone throws a grenade into the hatch of an abandoned tank. Explosion, fire, and detonation. This video shows the pride of Russian tankers, the T-90M tank. Amusingly, a homemade kamikaze drone handles it and destroys it. The Ukrainians spend up to $2,000 on such a drone, while the Russians lost a scarce tank worth more than $4.5 million. Where are you guys going? An FPV drone catches up with a Russian tank. It manages to damage the engine. The crew is forced to abandon the tank and flee. This is how hitting a tank looks like through the eyes of a Russian soldier. And this is another daring Russian tank that exploded on mines after a combat mission. The story ends with huge pillars of fire and the loss of the T-90 tank. In general, Russian tanks are continuing to delight us with such footage. They continue to burn, shooting 5-meter columns of fire or explosions, tossing the turret dozens of meters into the sky. If you're enjoying this format, let me know in the comments, and I'll be releasing similar videos every week. And this is the work of Ukrainian drones on Russian armored vehicles. Another Russian tank falls into a Ukrainian trap and loses its tracks. After dropping a grenade, a fire occurs. The drone flies to a safe distance and watches the tank burn. And these Russian soldiers in armored personnel carriers are ambushed by Ukrainians with ATGMs. The first APC rushes to a combat mission. It is overtaken by a Ukrainian missile. 2 more APCs follow. Perhaps they are on their way to evacuation. The second APC becomes another easy target for the Ukrainian armed forces. After being hit, the armored vehicle catches fire, which led to a powerful explosion. What happened to the third vehicle is unknown. Aerial reconnaissance detects 2 more complexes in one place at once. 1 missile is enough to destroy 2 targets. Nice work. Another Grad, and this is the large caliber 2C4 Tulpin howitzer. The 240mm gun easily destroys buildings and fortifications, which makes the howitzer priceless and in short supply. But the Russians are fighting as if they have thousands more of these mortars in stock. And from this video, you can assess the level of the Russian army. This is not a junkyard. This is not an abandoned position. This is a Russian army ammunition depot. Just one nearby hit destroys another depot. Another FPV drone hit on the tank. After hitting this tank, the Russians try to save it, but they do not succeed well. The tank travels a short distance and stalls. The crew leaves the hit vehicle in a hurry and escapes. What about this Russian tank? It looks serviceable. A kamikaze drone flies right into the open hatch and explodes inside. The tank is destroyed. And this is the precise work of Ukrainian artillery on a Russian tank. The crew of the tank is fleeing, leaving the immobilized vehicle behind. A few grenades into the open hatches, and the tank is destroyed. The Russians thought these structures would protect them from kamikaze drones? Well, they were wrong. A precise hit takes out an armored personnel carrier. And in this situation, the bars didn't save the armored vehicle from the drone. And this is a rare Russian BMP-2M, a modification with a unique Berezhok module. A few precise grenade throws, and a drone destroys an expensive armored personnel carrier. In order to slow down the advance of the Russians or cut off escape routes, Ukrainian sappers often carry out operations like this. They mine a section of road and then blow it up. Sappers plant explosives. Anti-tank mines TM62 are often used for such work. One explosion is not enough. After the second explosion, the Russians will have to use other roads, where the Ukrainians will be waiting for them. Stupidly, the Russians stacked large quantities of ammunition in a private house in Bakhmut. An AFU reconnaissance patrol discovered the warehouse and destroyed it with a precise hit, depriving the Russians of ammunition. Russian soldiers often drink vodka. Look at this video. They are not able to just run away. And this Russian tourist drank so much that he lost his pants. At the end of the road, he loses the battle to a young tree. Ukrainians detect a Russian tank. An FPV drone is launched. The first hit is to immobilize the Russian tank. After the second hit, the tank is most likely destroyed. But the Ukrainians decide to reassure themselves. The third drone crashes into the engine compartment of the tank, and the target is destroyed. And this is the outskirts of Donetsk. A Russian tank burns down beautifully after being destroyed. I think the question on the minds of the Russians is, how did the Ukrainians manage to destroy it? Another unique video. A Ukrainian tank set out on a combat mission. Russian artillery starts shooting at the tank. It looks to me like these are Grad MLRS. The most interesting thing happens at this point. The Russians are trying to stop the Ukrainian tank. The shells fired at the tank do not fly and hit the Russian positions. Friendly fire. After completing the task, the tank returns. Ukrainians organized an ambush near one of the roads. A tank and a truck drive along the road. The Stugna rocket is already chasing the Russian tank. The target is eliminated. The TOS-1A Soint-Sepyok is a formidable and effective weapon with many disadvantages. The first is weak defense. The second is low range. Its cost? $15 million. The cost of a drone is between $300 and $1,000, depending on the explosives. A destroyed Soint-Sepyok is 15,000 times more expensive than a drone. These drones also allow you to hit the enemy in cover. Check out this video. The operator directs the drone exactly inside the enemy position. And this extremely rare complex for remotely emplacing anti-tank mines? The Ukrainians are sending 3 drones at once to target this machine. This machine is capable of scattering up to 200 anti-tank mines at a time, or 12,000 anti-personnel mines. And most importantly, it does it remotely and promptly. How much more expensive do you think this complex was than the drone that destroyed it? A T-80 tank has taken up a fighting position and is aiming at the Ukrainians. Nothing to worry about. A kamikaze drone is already following it. A penetrating blow to the engine compartment causes a fire. The crew escapes, abandoning the burning equipment. And these guys were coming back from the front lines. A Ukrainian drone catches up with them. In a moment, we watch as Russian equipment turns to charcoal. A similar situation. After an armored personnel carrier is hit, a fire breaks out. What's wrong with the Russians' firefighting systems? Why are so many vehicles just burning up? Drones are profitable against any target that costs more than $1,000. See this? It's a self-propelled mortar. It has a short range, which is why it falls victim to a kamikaze drone. It's worth hundreds of times more than the cost of the drone. The Ukrainians are using RPG-7-shaped charge grenades against armored turrets. Its armor penetration is 500 millimeters. This probably reduces their penetration characteristics a bit, but from what we can see, it's enough. A Russian tank was ambushed, and a BMP came to the rescue. The Ukrainians were waiting for someone to come to the Russians' aid. A grenade penetrates the armor on the vehicle. The vehicle is damaged, and it stops. It's time to finish off the invaders' equipment. The Ukrainians again use drones. The tank's armor cannot withstand, and the ammunition is on fire. It's happening to the armored vehicle as well. Good work. FPV drones are very effective. Just watch this video. The drone hits the engine bay area of the tank. The tank manages to travel a short distance, but the damage causes a fire. The tank is destroyed. And these are the assault actions of Ukraine. I will draw your attention right away. The tank does not drive on the road. It drives on the field. The probability of encountering mines is much lower here. The Ukrainians' task is to smash the Russian fortifications before the infantry attack. After a few shots, the Russian field store catches fire. Very good. The tank accomplished its mission and retreated. This video shows the destruction of a Russian military column by Ukrainian artillery. More than 20 units of various Russian equipment came under fire. This is how, for example, one of the trucks filled with ammunition exploded. Strangely, we don't even see any attempts to move the vehicles away. Another senseless loss of a tank by the Russians. This time, a Ukrainian FPV drone destroys a tank with a precise hit. It flies around the moving tank to hit it in the engine compartment. The operator levels the drone and, when ready, launches it accurately into the target. HIMARS destroyed 4 Mazda-S SPHs. The Ukrainians spent 1 shell on each Russian artillery piece. Fast, accurate, and effective. 3 more lucky men. The Ukrainians destroy a D-30 howitzer with an accurate hit. Detect and hit 2 more Gvozdika SPHs. We see the characteristic explosions of HIMARS shells. And another victim. The Mazda B howitzer does not survive an encounter with an American monster shrapnel shell. But the Ukrainians engage HIMARS for counter-battery warfare only in situations where there were no fatter targets. For example, air defense complexes. Excuse me, but parking here is forbidden. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone strikes halted Russian terrorists' AFVs. The second target turned out to be a rare Tunguska anti-aircraft missile cannon system. Well done. Another ammunition depot on the front lines. And here, they were storing ammunition for a week of combat operations. The bottom line is that the Russians have nothing to fight with near Ugledar. The Ukrainians send the second drone and completely disable the BMP. Later, the Ukrainians finish off the vehicle with the Stugna anti-tank guided missile system. This is what another unsuccessful attempt by Russian tanks to break through in the Donetsk region looks like. After another hit on the tank, it bursts into flames like a match. The Ukrainians also destroyed other equipment and ammunition depots. This is how $20 million turns into scrap metal. This is the Panzer S-1. Its mission is to fight Ukrainian air targets near Bakhmut. The Russians decide to move the complex closer to the forest. A hit by artillery causes the machine to catch fire. Later, a detonation occurs. This is all that is left of the Panzer. Another job with high-precision shells. The Russians drove their Panzer S-1 into the range of Ukrainian artillery. Another costly loss for the Russian army. And this Russian MLRS made a beautiful boom. The drone detects the installation. It appears to be abandoned. The first bomb misses. The second falls directly on the ammunition rails and causes the shells to explode instantly. This is what a T-90M breakthrough tank blast on a mine looks like through the eyes of a tanker. Surprisingly, no matter how good a tank is, it can be stopped by an anti-tank mine. And this is a reconnaissance battle of a group of Ukrainian tanks. One of them runs over a mine and an explosion occurs. The Ukrainians stop to evacuate the crew of the hit tank. Fortunately, we see the entire crew leave the tank. They were saved. Another hit by Ukrainian artillery. This time, the prey is a Russian armored personnel carrier. Another graveyard of Russian armored vehicles. A drone drops a grenade on one of the armored personnel carriers. The vehicles are destroyed. Russian paratroopers have arrived at their positions. A Ukrainian drone with explosives is already on guard. A precise throw and a grenade goes into the hatch of the armored personnel carrier. Now the paratroopers find themselves without a transport. There could have been difficulties in destroying the third target. but the skill of the drone operator helped to evade the complex missile and hit it. This Russian Tor Sam made a beautiful bada boom. I don't know what exactly it was hit with, but it was enough to detonate its ammunition. Soldiers use special goggles and a joystick to control the copter. Now, any tank on a mission has a good chance of being destroyed by such a drone. This human-guided flying munition can have a range of up to 10 kilometers. Now here's a real example right in front of you. The Russians are shelling Ukrainian positions with a Tulpin heavy mortar. The war of the future is heating up in Ukraine. The military has adapted FPV drones and turned them into deadly weapons. And that's all in the last week. Well done, Ukrainians! As you have realized, HIMARS is actively used for counter-battery warfare. The first victim of the system in this video is the Gvozdika SPH, a characteristic explosion of HIMARS shell, and the ammunition launcher is destroyed. Aerial reconnaissance detects Grad MLRS, a perfect target. There's a hit! But that's not all. Reconnaissance detects an enemy Hyacinth S. Boom! Mission accomplished. This Russian tank stopped in the field. A grave mistake. The Ukrainians point the Stugna ATGM and fire a missile. This is all that is left of it. This Russian tank in Marinka was hit by Ukrainian artillery fire. A cloud of fire rises after being hit. The Russian junk continues to move. Another hit. Eventually, the tank was immobilized and destroyed. Zaporizhzhia region. A Russian armored group came under Ukrainian artillery fire. 7 vehicles were destroyed, 5 armored vehicles, and 2 tanks. The Ukrainians detect the MTLB and launch a drone with explosives. A single hit may be enough to take this armored vehicle out of action and later take it as a trophy or destroy it. Ukrainian artillery switches to the Russians in the forest belt. After several accurate hits, the Russians decide to flee. But running across the field to the nearest shelter is madness. The Russians decide to do that as well. A bad idea. Most of them couldn't make it. The remnants of the defeated Russian army gather in a populated area, but Ukrainian artillery destroys the transport in which they plan to evacuate. They set off again on foot. What happens to them next is revealed in the following videos. The SBU destroyed at least 4 Russian SAM complexes. These are Tor M1 and Buck 2M. The Russians are learning quickly, setting up electronic supplies, setting up factories to produce these weapons, and using them on the battlefield. The delay in helping Ukraine leads to human casualties, so I urge you not to remain indifferent. The war is not over yet. And this video perfectly demonstrates the fight of such drones against fortified and equipped positions. An anti-tank system, an automatic grenade launcher, and a large caliber machine gun. The first target is a machine gun. The second is an anti-tank missile system. Third, grenade launcher. Nice work. Another firing point with a large caliber machine gun. The drone makes a smooth landing and hits the target. Everything that I've talked about in this video makes us realize drones are now an integral part of any military operations. They help to destroy enemy vehicles, logistics, various complexes, and infantry. The SUV with the Russian officers was heading back to headquarters. This time, they're not getting away. A drone attacks the vehicle. Ukrainians release another drone, and the SUV is destroyed. There are dozens of strikes like this every day. I'm showing you a very small fraction of what I see. And surveillance, communications, electronic warfare, anti-tank and machine gun points, drones are directly involved in the fight against them as well. The Russians have installed surveillance equipment on this tall pipe. One drone is enough to destroy the complex. Another perfect example. The Russians have set up a firing point and are preventing the Ukrainians from advancing. A kamikaze drone flies inside the structure and destroys the terrorists' weapons. The Ukrainians are also using drones to strike at Russian logistics. Take a look here. These are 2 cars and a truck that the Russian terrorists are using to move between their positions. The Ukrainian operator is pointing a drone at the most valuable one among them. This is an ammunition delivery vehicle right at the positions. After that, the Russian boys got a little down. The line of an abandoned terrorist armored personnel carrier. Nice work! Who's this here? Another lost Russian T-90. The first drone dives into the turret. Looks like we need another strike. The Ukrainians launch a second drone. The operator aims it at the tank's engine. Target destroyed. Another victim. A Russian tank goes on a combat mission. The crew does not know what fate awaits them. The first Ukrainian drone stops the tank, followed by a second drone. There's the penetration. Goodbye, Russian terrorist tankers. This video is not the best quality, but no less beautiful. A Ukrainian drone first shoots down a Russian T-90. The second drone dives into the open hatch of the tank. I've got a question for the experts in the audience. Why do you think there have been so many destroyed T-90 tanks recently? Moving on, it's time for you guys to go home. The kamikaze drone penetrates the armor and sets the tank on fire. You can see that when the second drone arrives to assess the situation. I would call this place Death's Crossroads. If you follow the events, you'll definitely recognize this place. A drone takes out an abandoned Russian tank. Way to go! And this Russian tank is hiding in the bushes. A high-precision shell turns the tank into a mountain of scrap metal. This drone drops a grenade and hits the open hatch. What a heartwarming video of a terrorist tank on fire. Some more precise work of the Ukrainian operator. The drone starts dropping grenade after grenade on the abandoned tank. The Russian armor succumbs to the onslaught. The tank catches fire and explodes. Pieces of scrap metal are all that's left of it. Tanks prepare their positions for the assault. They need to do the most damage and sow panic among the Russians. 3 M113 armored personnel carriers follow. The tanks hit the fortifications accurately. The armored personnel carriers approach on command. They also fire at the enemy. The Ukrainians throw smoke bombs and get closer to the Russians. The assault has begun. We will show you its continuation in a future video, and you'll like it very much. Here's a little hint for you. In this fragment are the trophy weapons that the Ukrainians captured. These are only working copies, and by them you can already understand how many Russians were killed in this battle. Another powerful blow to the Russian supply. The video shows the Russian refuelers. The first hit causes one of the vehicles to catch fire. When the temperature becomes critical, there is a powerful explosion. Flying fuel tanker parts damage the neighboring vehicle, which leads to another explosion. The result, the fuel trucks are destroyed or critically damaged. Hunting for a hunter. In this video, Ukrainians hit the Strela 10 surface-to-air missile system. First, the drone tracked the complex. And then, the Ukrainian artillery struck a precise blow. A beautiful detonation. And I can't help but show you this clip of the Strela 10 SAM, the exact destruction of 5 Russian reconnaissance UAVs. Absolutely beautiful. Take a look at this video. A Russian tank has become a target. It seems that the first hit did not cause significant damage to it. Shrapnel from the second hit damaged the tank. Moments later, columns of smoke and fire erupt from it. A Ukrainian drone throws a grenade into the open hatch of a Russian tank. After the explosion, a heavy fire starts. The tank is destroyed. In this case, the very thing that I'm talking about happened. The drone penetrated the armor and hit the ammunition. The tank was instantly torn apart. The sides of Russian tanks have thin armor. The ATGM easily overcomes it and hits the ammunition. The result is the detonation of the tank. I often see in the comments that you guys enjoy the way turrets of Russian tanks are sent skyward. This is exactly what happens because of such stacking of shells. Boom! The tank is destroyed. This is how one of the Russian tanks exploded in the Taurian direction. The turret flew up in the air for dozens of meters. And this video is a perfect demonstration of Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance. Using a drone, the Ukrainians detect an ammunition depot. The data is transmitted to the artillery. A hit near the building causes the warehouse to catch fire. Mission accomplished. Now let's look at some examples. The drone dives into the most vulnerable location. Fragments penetrate the external tanks and ignite the fuel. Naturally, such a fire can no longer be put out. Gradually, the fire gets to the mechanism with the shells, and the tank explodes. You often see videos like this. One grenade is enough to hit the internal fuel tanks with shrapnel. Even if the powder for the shells is not immediately ignited, the fuel remaining in the tanks ignites, and then the ammunition. The operator uses a thermobaric grenade. The cloud of flame after its explosion easily penetrates into the charging mechanism and ignites the gunpowder. If there are enough shells, the tank turns into shrapnel. The situation is the same with the Russian army's AFVs, only their armor is even thinner, and they are much easier to hit. In this case, the operator does not need to try to choose the weakest armor. It's all thin. The kamikaze drone easily penetrates it, and then everything goes on as usual. First the smoke, then fire, and total destruction. And this one? A Russian tank returns from a sortie, on which it was almost destroyed by the Ukrainians. The tank hits a mine, tries to turn around, and explodes again. The flames ignite, the ammunition heats up, and explodes. So, the tank was destroyed by the flames after the mine exploded, and not by the mine itself? And this Russian Ural demonstrated car torquing. After the FPV drone hit, the car caught fire. The Russians tried to move the car away, but it was too late. They abandoned it and continued to roll backwards. And this is where the hot dancing begins. The drone returns after replacing the battery and finds the Russian car in flames. And here's what's left of it. The Russian Akatsiya self-propelled artillery unit made a beautiful bada-boom. Another Akatsiya, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone hitting exactly on target. Instant detonation of ammunition, the artillery unit destroyed. And this Russian Hail fell prey to a precision Excalibur projectile. Another hit with a high-precision Excalibur. The Russian D-20 howitzer turns into scrap metal. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone goes hunting. The operator wants to use the drone to get into the open hatch to destroy the abandoned tank for sure. The Ukrainian succeeds, and the Russian tank is destroyed. And these dramatic events for the Russians take place near the Kremina forests. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance detects a cluster of Russian soldiers. A drone transmits the exact coordinates to the spotters. Several accurate hits hit the area with the Russians. I'm sure that this benefited the Ukrainians, and some of the Russians went to Kobzone's concert. Check out this video. Now watch this fragment. The projectile impact has a distinctive explosion. It's the work of the HIMARS. It's unmistakable. That's how his ammunition explodes. Here's a few more examples. Here's a funny situation. Russians on a BMP thought to escape from pursuit of a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. 1-0 in favor of the Ukrainians. Oh, what do we have here? The Strela 10 is an important and rare system. The kamikaze drone easily takes out the Russian hardware. What's that trough? The unloading of shells has been stopped. Guys, get out! Another Russian monster, a truck with an S-60 cannon. Nice hit. It's almost beautiful. And the cherry on top, a precise hit on a Gaz-66 truck. A very large number of Russian vehicles have been destroyed by FPV kamikaze drones. Let's take a look at the most interesting and exciting ones. Remember when I said this wasn't the last tulip destroyed in this video? An FPV drone delivers a package straight to a Russian heavy mortar. A beautiful geyser of sparks and fire warms up the frustrated Russian boys. Let's take a look at this. The Russians are constantly changing positions. The Ukrainians have to watch and wait. Finally, they manage to catch the entire air defense battery and hit the launchers, the radar station, and the command center all at the same time. This is the radar station. It's damaged, and the fuel tanker is leaking fuel. And in this footage, the launcher and loader are completely destroyed. Nice operation. At this rate, the Russian army will soon go deaf and blind in Ukraine. This is how the Zettel electronic warfare was destroyed. And in this video, we have a hygiene vehicle. But why do the Russians need it? It's not for no reason that they're called dirty asses in Ukraine. The junk is destroyed. Hey Russians, how's the supply situation with the forward units? Not so good. It burns beautifully. An anti-aircraft launcher on a truck chassis. The kamikaze drone is on target. We've got a hit. The SAM is destroyed. Video of another Russian failure. One BMP stands in a forest belt and fires at AFU positions. The Ukrainians fire from an ATGM. A precise hit on the armored vehicle puts it out of action. There is a powerful explosion. The armored vehicle is torn in half. The second APC, realizing that the case will end badly, drives away. But not far away. Ukrainian artillery strikes several precise strikes. One of them accurately hits the armored vehicle and destroys it. The Stugna P anti-tank missile continues to destroy Russian tanks. The explosion scatters the parts of the tank in different directions. Another lucky man. When the tank takes a position, the Ukrainians fire a missile. One more penetration and a powerful explosion. And this Russian tank was stopped by Ukrainian artillery. The drone drops 3 grenades, and the last one hits the open hatch. The fire destroys the tank. And this is the destruction of abandoned Russian BMPs. A drone drops a thermobaric grenade and hits an open hatch. Nearby is the second BMP. Look at the hole the grenade went into. I've rewatched this fragment several times. Those grief-stricken paratroopers were on their way to the front. They didn't make it. A drone catches up with a Russian AFV. A second drone flies to the scene to assess the outcome. Target destroyed. Hey Russians, this is a message for you. 1. Don't leave your fire unattended. 2. Don't smoke in the interior of the BMP-2. 3. Don't throw cigarette butts on the side of the road. And 4. Don't mess around with pyrotechnics. And in general, don't start a war with Ukraine. The Russians have stationed their AFVs in this small town. It's time to turn them into scrap metal. The first target is hit. It's now smoking. The second drone hits another AFV parked outside a neighboring building. Alright, let's move on. The third drone dives right into the first trough. Turns out there's another armored personnel carrier hidden nearby. The fourth drone hits it too. All 3 targets have been destroyed. Isn't that enough for you? Alright, it's time to load the cluster munitions. Russian grieving soldiers, now you will feel the Ukrainian fury. Blow after blow, the ammunition starts raining down on the Russians' heads. In the end, do you think there are any survivors? By the way, would you guys be interested in a video on the topic of cluster munitions in Ukraine? How did they affect the fighting? How effective are they? Write your opinion down in the comments. A truck full of Russian paratroopers are in a hurry to get somewhere. They don't know they're already a target.
Давай.
Look how tense the cameraman is. The kamikaze drone hits the target.
Ескадрон!
Nice work.
Димить, горить!
There are Russian military personnel traveling in this car. These are not ordinary soldiers, but officers. In a moment, a Ukrainian drone is conducting an outreach. Our best wishes to the recently departed. This truck is carrying shells and towing a Russian howitzer at the same time. It's time to put a stop to this. Boom! We got a hit. Truck and howitzer destroyed. Another detonation. The FPV drone dives into the forehead of the BMP. There is a powerful explosion after the hit. More beautiful footage. The Russian MTLB has been abandoned. The drone returns with ammunition and descends below. 5 accurate hits. The armor of the armored personnel carrier doesn't hold up. The vehicle is incinerated. A kamikaze drone crashes into the side of the armored vehicle and punctures the fuel tanks. 15 minutes later, a second drone arrives and watches the Russian armored vehicle catch on fire. Most likely, the ammunition was detonated. The turret was torn off. It is lying right next to it. Now, often, the Russians use AFVs to bring ammunition to their positions. If a drone strikes such a vehicle, it causes a massive explosion. This video is one of the most recent ones. A drone dives into the front of an armored personnel carrier. It has enough armor penetration to hit the ammunition stacked inside the vehicle. The massive explosion rips the AFV into thousands of small pieces. By the way, there is a third reason why this happens. The Russians have a weak firefighting system. It simply does not work. It is not enough. And knowing the Russians' attitude towards their machinery, I'm sure that it is not always installed or serviced in time. Now, let's take a look at this video. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone strikes a Russian AFV. At first glance, it seems that no damage is done by the drone. But the Russians have a problem. They stop and leave the AFV. Moments later, flames destroy the Russian junk. Why is this happening? That's the question that we're going to look for an answer to today. After analyzing dozens of videos, I came to the conclusion: the current armored vehicles, tanks, and AFVs are technically unprepared for the war that is raging in Ukraine. Anti-tank mines, precision artillery, ATGMs, kamikaze drones, and drone bombers. All of these weapons exploit the vulnerabilities of armored vehicles and effectively counter them. The Russians abandoned their tank. It was probably immobilized with mines or ATGMs. The Ukrainians launch an FPV drone. The drone dives precisely into the engine compartment. Almost always, this causes the tank to catch on fire. This case was no exception. The tank is engulfed in flames. The cost of such a drone is about $350 to $500, and the cost of the destroyed tank? About $2 million. HIMARS strikes are hard to confuse with anything else. In this video, the Ukrainians demonstrate how just 2 shells hit 2 Russian Masta-S self-propelled artillery units. It's a thing of beauty. What does this hit look like? That's right. Another defeat of Russian equipment by American HIMARS. The Tor-2M SAM is destroyed. HIMARS became a weapon that helped turn the tide of the war. Now, these MLRSs are doing a lot of damage to the Russian army on a daily basis. This video shows the defeat of 2 electronic warfare systems. Very necessary and scarce. And this is what the aftermath of the failed Russian assault looks like. The video shows 2 Russian armored personnel carriers burning to the ground. Russians, a question for you. No casualties? The Russians tried to cross the minefield and failed. The tank is stopped. The crew escapes. This SPH was stuffed with ammunition and exploded violently when hit by a rocket. No matter how much the Russians tried to protect their artillery, even partially burying it, it doesn't help. A special feature of the HIMARS is its high accuracy. Now, I've got dozens of similar videos in very good quality. If you're interested in seeing a sequel, write about it down in the comments. Are you hiding, little Russians? It won't help you. First, the drone does the damage, and then the Ukrainians fire on the tank with an ATGM. The target is damaged and will not be able to participate in combat operations. Nearby, there's another system. You can see shrapnel exploding next to the MLRS. One of them hits the system with a loaded package of missiles, and there is a powerful explosion. Check out this crater. It's brutal. Another abandoned Russian tank. A thermobaric grenade flies exactly into the hole. The shells ignite and destroy the tank. The turret is thrown back dozens of meters. The pieces of the tank are scattered all around. And in the place of the tank, a smoldering crater. And this is what happens when you bring this kind of equipment to the front. The UR-77 becomes easy prey for a strike drone. How epic they always blow up. Something went wrong for the Russian boys, and they abandoned the BMP. The drone drops a grenade and flies off to replace the battery. But when it returns, the armored vehicle is destroyed. A nice surprise. Another abandoned armored personnel carrier. The Ukrainians fill it with explosives and blow it up. The armored vehicle is no more. The fire leads to the explosion. There is nothing left at the place of the BMP. Now, this Russian junk isn't going anywhere. And this is the exact work of FPV drone operators. The first drone brings down an armored personnel carrier. And this is the work of Ukrainian artillery in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Russian armored vehicles moved in to evacuate their soldiers, who are repelling the Ukrainian assault. They begin firing at the advancing Ukrainians. After the first artillery strike, the armored vehicles leave their positions, abandoning the soldiers. Two Russian Ivans are diligently trying to camouflage an ATGM. The Ukrainian operator waits for the Russians to finish and leave the complex. The Russians leave. The drone returns with explosives. A few grenades, and the ATGM is destroyed. And this is an electronic warfare complex. Its task is to interfere with Ukrainian drones. The Ukrainians survey the area and detect the transport. A few precise strikes, and the point of the Russians is destroyed. The next target is this house and radio-electronic reconnaissance and communication complexes. A few hits and the unprotected electronics are damaged. A unique video. Two Ukrainian tanks organized an ambush. There are 3 Russian tanks moving along this road. The Ukrainians are waiting for the Russians to come to the firing line. The Russians suspect nothing. The Ukrainians miss 2 tanks and hit the Russian tank with a targeted shot. There is an immediate detonation. The tank is destroyed. I believe the same fate awaited the remaining 2 Russian tanks. And this Russian tank maneuvers to avoid artillery hits. Do you think he can do it? Let's find out. A devastating hit. The Russian tank is destroyed. Another Russian tank. Being immobilized, it's an easy prey for the Ukrainian drone. A precise hit in the open gunner's hatch. The tank is engulfed in flames. When the temperature becomes critical, there is a powerful explosion. If you're lucky, a drone hit will cause the ammunition to ignite and cause a massive explosion. Check this out. The drone strikes the tank in the rear part of the turret, and immediately, columns of smoke and fire start bursting out of the tank under high pressure. Russian tanks sometimes have part of their ammunition in the turret. The shaped jet burns through the armor and ignites the shells. The result is fire and detonation. The Russian tank was immobilized. The decision is made to destroy it. The drone is directed to the most vulnerable part, where the tank's armor is the thinnest. Such a strike has this result. Subsequently, the tank will burn. 2 tanks are left on a combat mission. A kamikaze drone first accompanies them and then promptly attacks the first vehicle. But this does not stop the Russians. They start shelling Ukrainian positions. The second drone is on its way. It dives and hits a Russian tank. The flash is really bright. I think this tank is disabled. Let's get back to the tanks. They are the main force for offensive and defensive operations. It is tanks that allow you to quickly stop attacks or break through enemy defenses. Because of this, the tank is the #1 target on the battlefield. Therefore, the military greatly appreciates the means to deal with them quickly. Take a look at these examples. The distance from the operator to the target is about 10 kilometers. Despite the strong interference, the Ukrainian man manages to direct the drone precisely to the target. A rare and deadly mortar is destroyed. And this is a Russian counterattack in the Zaporizhzhia region. A T-72 tank goes first, followed by armored personnel carriers with infantry. The artillery fires the first shot that incapacitates the armored personnel carrier. The second shell hits the Russian tank. It is destroyed. Another tank decides to hide in the woods, but here too, the Ukrainian artillery proves deadly. The drone goes to replace the battery, and when it returns, it discovers this. Here's some unique footage of the destruction of a Russian tank. A drone hit causes a fire. Pillars of fire burst out of the hatches. Unfortunately, the drone discharged and did not capture the detonation. There is a small crater at the place where the tank was, and the pieces of the tank were scattered for dozens of meters in the area. The Ukrainians use a Polish AHS Crab howitzer to accurately destroy a Russian Tulpen heavy mortar. This is a rare and valuable mortar, capable of destroying very serious fortifications. And this is the Soviet Ugly Monster. First, the Ukrainians destroyed the AGS mounted on the armored vehicle. And later, a precise hit destroyed the armored vehicle itself. Another video of Ukrainians hunting. A truck drives along the road and pulls a howitzer behind it. The drone accurately hits the Russian tractor. The Russians unhook the howitzer, turn around, and drive away. But that doesn't help them. A second Ukrainian kamikaze drone catches up with the Russian vehicle. Did you think the Ukrainians would stop there? They send a third drone and destroy the Russian howitzer. Mission accomplished. A Ukrainian FPV drone approaches a Russian BMP-2. A hit to the front of the armored personnel carrier results in a powerful detonation. This happens quite rarely. The Russian junk is destroyed. In this video, the Russians are acting like ISIS terrorists. They filled a T-54 tank with 6 tons of TNT and directed it toward Ukrainian positions. The tank didn't make it about 100 meters before it exploded on a mine. The Ukrainians fired an RPG at the stopped tank, which caused the explosives to detonate. First, reconnaissance detects the target. Then, the coordinates are transmitted to the nearest HIMARS calculations. When everything is ready, the Ukrainians send some gifts to the Russians and burn the Russian equipment. What were the Russians counting on by moving their equipment into the open? The Ukrainians followed them, waited for the Russians to stop, and aimed missiles at them. And this is the Tornado MLRS, a rare, valuable, and deadly machine. One shot, and the Russians don't stand a chance. If you watch this video in slow motion, you can see how the HIMARS missile hits the target. This SAM wasn't so lucky either. The HIMARS fragmentation missile causes the missiles of the complex to detonate. A Ukrainian drone destroys a Russian BMP on the second attempt. A very beautiful detonation. Excellent work. And this is the fight against the logistics of Russian terrorists. A massive explosion of a field depot with ammunition. One grenade was enough to deprive the Russians of a weak supply of ammunition. And just like that, another Russian ammunition and fuel depot exploded beautifully. The drone watches on as the flames destroy the remnants of the Russian world. Russians died trying to attack. It looked really stupid. Check this out. Another suicidal attempt. There are plenty of mines stacked up ahead. It's all over, pretty obviously. The beautiful detonation of a BMP after hitting mines. Here's even a second angle. A kamikaze drone chases a Russian tank with a brazier. The operator aims the drone at the engine and disables the tank. Superb. Disguise it or don't disguise it. It won't work. Boom! We got a hit. A beautiful fire show from a Russian BMD. The turret is torn off and thrown up to dozens of meters. A drone dives into the front of an armored personnel carrier. Now this Russian junk is ready to be scrapped. What have we got here? 2 Akatsiya SPHs. Well, guys, if you're caught in the lenses of Ukrainian reconnaissance drones, you don't have long to live. The Ukrainians hit the first target first, followed by the second. The Russians hid their tank in a wooded area, apparently not good enough. The drone corrected the artillery and helped destroy this pan. This is what the mindless Russian attacks led to. Another failure. The AFV miraculously manages to escape and is not destroyed. The fate of the tank was much sadder. It hit a mine and burst into flames. And this is all that's left of it. The tank you saw at the beginning didn't stop and moved on. That's the fate that awaited him. And this is how the counterattack of the Russian armored group ended. 3 tanks and 3 AFVs are trying to get behind the Ukrainians. Aerial reconnaissance detects them in time. The Ukrainian artillery begins to make heavy blows to the terrorists. One of the shells exactly hits a tank. The result? 2 tanks and 1 AFV were destroyed. The other equipment manages to escape. The assault was a failure. And this tank was on its way to shell Ukrainian positions, but it failed. Good Ukrainian soldiers prevented it. Here's a video from the phone of a Russian tanker. Next video. 3 Hyacinth S units form a battery. The Ukrainians point artillery and fire a salvo. The second hit sets one of the units on fire. There is a powerful explosion. It is visible even from the Ukrainian positions. The explosion sets fire to a neighboring artillery unit. This is an example of professional counter-battery fighting. And in this video, you'll see yet another example of the Russian military being idiotic. The Ukrainians discover a Russian howitzer. Artillery receives coordinates. Nearby, the Russians have placed an ammunition depot. A big mistake. One hit on the building, and not only the warehouse will be destroyed, but also the delivery trucks, howitzer crews, and the gun itself. The first hits into the howitzer, the second into the building. Second target, a Russian D-30 howitzer. A precise hit by Ukrainian artillery caused an immediate detonation of the shells. The neighboring building also explodes. The clever Russians have stacked ammunition there.